Dr. Lucas always knew he wanted to be a doctor. From an early age, he watched his mother, a dedicated nurse, care for patients with a tenderness that touched even the hardest of hearts. She spent long hours at the hospital, and Lucas accompanied her whenever he could, fascinated by the way she connected with people. In his young mind, medicine was more than just a profession. It was a way to touch lives, to make a difference in a world that often seemed indifferent. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were limited and challenges were many, Lucas learned early on the importance of determination. He wasn't just a dreamer. He was a boy preparing to face a world that often didn't believe in his ability to achieve great things. While other students were distracted by the trivialities of childhood, Lucas spent hours studying, devouring science and medical books, dreaming of one day becoming a doctor who could help his community. As he entered high school, the reality of racial inequality began to shine through. Lucas often found himself dealing with curious stares and snide comments, especially regarding his academic performance. While some of his peers were partying, he spent nights studying, determined to be the best. The pressure was immense, but Lucas kept his head up. He knew that he was fighting for more than just a good grade. It was for his family, his community, and most importantly, himself. Finally, after years of hard work and dedication, Lucas graduated from high school and got a place at one of the best medical schools in the country. His mother's pride when she saw her 18-year-old son dressed in a gown and receiving his diploma was indescribable. This achievement was a milestone not only for Lucas, but for his entire family who had faced so many adversities. He was ready to face the challenges of medicine, determined to break down barriers and become an example for other young Black people who dreamed of following the same path. However, medical school brought new challenges. Lucas found himself in a competitive environment where the pressure was intense and the expectations were sky-high. He felt he needed to stand out, not only because of his talent, but also to challenge the stereotypes surrounding Black healthcare professionals. During his years of study, Lucas realized that medicine was not just about technical knowledge. It was about empathy, compassion, and the ability to see the human being behind the disease. After years of hard work, he finally graduated. Graduation day was one of the most emotional days of his life, a celebration not only of his accomplishments, but also of all the struggles his family had faced. Dr. Lucas, now a physician, was ready to begin his career with an unwavering commitment to serving his community and fighting the prejudice he encountered along the way. When Lucas began his practice at a public hospital in his hometown, he knew that his presence there had special meaning. He was not just a doctor. He was a symbol of hope and change for many. His work was an opportunity to show that skin color did not determine ability, and that every patient deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. He was determined to make a difference, not just as a doctor, but as an advocate for social justice. The days at the hospital were challenging but rewarding. Lucas dedicated himself to each patient, listening to their stories, learning about their struggles, and celebrating their victories. He found joy in small moments, like seeing a patient recover and smile again, or hearing a child laugh during an appointment. However, he also faced the harsh reality of prejudice, which often surfaced in interactions with some colleagues and patients. On a sunny spring day, while seeing a patient in his office, Lucas reflected on his journey. He knew that despite the challenges he still faced, he was exactly where he needed to be. Every step he took had led him there, and he was determined to keep fighting, not only for his career, but for all those who still didn't have a voice. The road ahead might be difficult, but Lucas was prepared. He was a doctor, an advocate, and most of all, a dreamer. Little did he know, however, that one fateful day would put him at an emotional crossroads, challenging not only his resolve, but also his very identity. What seemed like an ordinary day at the hospital would soon become a turning point, a moment that would test his beliefs and his courage. As Lucas's journey continued, he would face the reality of prejudice in ways he never imagined. The sun had been up for a few hours when Dr. Lucas arrived at the hospital. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the sound of the hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors moving through the lobby. Lucas always arrived early. He enjoyed these moments of tranquility before the whirlwind of a workday. He knew that each day at the hospital brought new challenges, but also the opportunity to help someone in a meaningful way. Today, he was particularly excited. He had planned a series of appointments with patients who needed follow-up care, and each one represented an opportunity to connect. For Lucas, medicine wasn't just about diagnoses and treatments. It was about stories and lives that intertwined, about the impact he could have on the world around him. At his first appointment of the day, Lucas met with Dona Clara, an elderly woman who came to the hospital regularly for diabetes management. He greeted her with a smile and began reviewing her medical history. As they chatted, Lucas noticed how excited she was to tell him about her new carrot cake recipe, something she had been making with her granddaughter. He smiled, remembering how his own grandmother used to make sweet treats for the family. "Dona Clara, don't forget to send me a slice next time you come here," Lucas joked as she laughed, her eyes shining. This kind of interaction always brought joy to his heart, reminding him of why he had chosen this profession. After his appointment with Dona Clara, Lucas spent the morning seeing other patients, each of whom brought their own stories and challenges. However, as lunchtime approached, Lucas began to sense a slight unease in the air. He heard whispers among some of his co-workers that made him wary, but he decided to ignore them. He knew that the best way to confront prejudice was to focus on what really mattered: his patients. Finally, at lunchtime, Lucas joined a group of colleagues in the cafeteria. It was a vibrant space where healthcare professionals shared laughter and stories of their daily lives. As Lucas sat, he overheard a conversation about a new patient who had been admitted. The senior physician, Dr. Mendez, commented on the patient's history, which was known to be difficult and required a lot of patience. "I don't know how you, Lucas, are going to deal with him," Dr. Mendez said, unable to hide a smile. "You know how he is. And well, maybe he doesn't trust you like he trusts other doctors." The comment drew laughter from around the table, and Lucas, even though he sensed the sarcastic tone, forced a smile. He felt embarrassed, but he didn't let it get to him. He responded lightly, "All patients deserve care, no matter who they are." But inside, the phrase echoed as a bitter reminder that even in a space that should have been welcoming, he still faced barriers. After lunch, Lucas returned to his office. He was preparing to see the patient mentioned earlier, a man named Carlos, who had been admitted due to health complications. Lucas took a deep breath, focusing on the importance of his profession and the need to care for each patient, regardless of prejudices. When Carlos entered, Lucas introduced himself, but he noticed the distrust in the man's eyes. Carlos didn't seem at ease and maintained a defensive posture. "What do you want, doctor?" he asked, almost challenging. Lucas felt the tension in the air, but decided to stand his ground. "I want to help you," Lucas replied, trying to convey reassurance and empathy. "I saw that you had some complications, and I would like to better understand your situation so that I can find the best treatment." Carlos didn't respond immediately, and silence stretched between them. Lucas's gaze sought to connect with the patient, but Carlos looked away, as if he was trying to ignore Lucas's presence. "I'd rather have a more experienced doctor take care of me," Carlos finally said, his voice low but firm. The sentence cut Lucas like a knife. He knew that this wasn't just a refusal of treatment, but a reflection of the prejudice that still permeated society. "Carlos, I understand your concern," Lucas said, remaining calm, "but I am trained and qualified to care for you. I can assure you that your well-being is my priority." Carlos shook his head, dissatisfied. "I'm not convinced. I want another doctor." Lucas's heart sank. The frustration and pain were palpable, and the humiliation of his rejection settled in the back of his mind. He felt like all his hard work and dedication were being questioned, not because of his abilities, but because of the color of his skin. It was an experience he was familiar with, but one that always hit him like a blow. "Carlos, this isn't about me. It's about your health. You need treatment." "I'm here to help," Lucas insisted, but the man turned and left the office, leaving Lucas alone. He took a deep breath, fighting the emotions that threatened to overflow. What should have been a day of fulfillment had become a battle against the prejudices that still permeated the environment in which he worked. After this consultation, Lucas sat at his desk, his mind in turmoil. He reflected on the day, on what he had heard in the cafeteria and what he had just experienced. He felt powerless, as if his achievements and efforts were insignificant compared to the prejudice he faced. A wave of discouragement enveloped him, but he also felt a flame of determination burning within him. Determined not to let this define him, Lucas took a moment to collect himself. He knew he had to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for everyone else who faced discrimination. His journey was just beginning, and he was ready to take on whatever challenge came his way. The rest of the day at the hospital went on, but the interaction with Carlos echoed in Dr. Lucas's mind. He couldn't shake the sense of frustration that followed him like a persistent shadow. Interactions that should have been rewarding were being overshadowed by deep-rooted prejudices that still persisted in society and the medical environment. Lucas was determined not to let a single patient define his worth, but Carlos's words still haunted him. The next morning, Lucas arrived at the hospital with a new determination. He decided that no matter what happened, he would continue to provide the best possible care to each of his patients. His first appointment of the day was with a young man named Pedro, who needed preventative care. The interaction with Pedro was very positive, and Lucas felt his confidence renewed with each smile the boy saw. However, this sense of relief did not last. As the clock struck noon, Lucas received news that a new patient had been admitted, and he would be the doctor responsible for evaluating him. It was a complicated case, and Lucas knew that he would need all of his skill and sensitivity to deal with the situation. When Lucas entered the hospital room, he found a middle-aged man who was visibly agitated. The patient, named Roberto, was recovering from surgery and seemed anxious. Lucas introduced himself, trying to convey a sense of calm and reassurance. "Hello, I'm Dr. Lucas. I'm here to take care of you. How are you feeling today?" he asked, noticing Roberto's signs of stress. "I'm feeling fine, but I'm not sure if you're the right doctor to see me," Roberto replied, looking suspicious. The sentence set off an alarm inside Lucas. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. I just don't trust black doctors. I prefer another professional," Roberto replied, without hesitation. Lucas's world fell apart in an instant. He felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. This was the second time in less than 24 hours that he had faced such hostility. Humiliation washed over him, and tumultuous emotions began to overflow. He knew he was facing a prejudice that was not about him, but somehow it still felt like a personal attack. "Roberto, I understand that you may have your concerns," Lucas began, struggling to keep his voice calm. "But I am qualified and experienced. What matters here is your health and the treatment you need." "I don't want to hear this. I want a white doctor to see me," Roberto insisted, his expression hard. The patient's words were like a blow straight to Lucas's heart. He was there to help, but instead he found himself being rejected because of the color of his skin. "It's important that you trust me, Roberto. I'm here to take care of you and make sure you get the right treatment," Lucas argued, but the conversation was becoming increasingly tense. He felt helpless in the face of the situation, fighting against the tide of prejudice that seemed to dominate that moment. "I just want a different doctor. It's not personal, it's just, I prefer it this way," Roberto said, crossing his arms, clearly determined not to change his mind. Lucas took a deep breath, fighting the anger and sadness that were building inside him. He knew he couldn't let his emotions get the better of him. "If you don't want me to help you, I can call a colleague," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Roberto nodded, but Lucas was already feeling defeated. He left the room, taking with him a feeling of inadequacy and pain. It was as if his achievements, his education, and his dedication over the years were erased by the distrust of a man who barely knew him. In the hallway, Lucas ran into Anna, the nurse who had become a friend and confidant over time. She could tell immediately that something was wrong. "What happened, Lucas?" she asked, her concern evident. Lucas hesitated for a moment before telling her about the incident. As he spoke, pain and frustration spilled over into his words. He felt exposed and vulnerable, and Anna listened intently, her expression reflecting empathy and understanding. "This is unacceptable, Lucas," she said, her voice filled with passion. "You deserve to be respected. And most importantly, your patients need to understand that your abilities are not determined by the color of your skin." "I just don't know how to deal with it," Lucas admitted, the sadness still present in his voice. "Sometimes I feel like everything I've done to get here might not be enough." Anna looked into his eyes, her gaze full of determination. What you're doing is important, and your fight is valid. Don't give up, Lucas. You have the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And you're not alone. Many of us are here to support you. Lucas thanked Anna for her solidarity. She always had the gift of making him feel seen and heard, even in the most difficult moments. He knew he could not give up, that he had to keep fighting against the prejudice that still permeated society, even if it meant facing moments of profound humiliation. The rest of the day passed slowly. Lucas saw other patients, but the tension from the incident with Roberto still hung over him. He knew he had to find a way to turn this pain into motivation, but the internal struggle was heavy. He looked around, observing the pulsating life of the hospital, filled with intertwining stories. Every patient, every smile, every tear, everything came together to form a mosaic of humanity. And despite the challenges, Lucas was determined to be part of this tapestry. As the day drew to a close and the sunlight began to fade, Lucas paused to take a breath. He needed time to refocus, to remember why he had chosen this career path. The fight against prejudice would be ongoing, but he also knew that each challenge he faced made him stronger. He was determined not to let prejudice define him. His journey was just beginning, and he refused to let these incidents stop him from moving forward. And so, with this renewed determination, Lucas prepared himself for what awaited him in the coming days. He knew that he would face many more challenges, but he was ready to fight. The battle against prejudice was just beginning, and he committed to rising after each fall, to growing stronger after each insult, and to remember that despite the adversity, there was always a light of hope shining ahead. The following week brought with it a series of challenges, but Lucas was determined not to let the negative experiences get to him. He continued to care for his patients with dedication, always seeking the human connection that inspired him. However, his interactions with Roberto and Carlos still haunted him, causing him to constantly question his career choice and the impact his work truly had. One morning, as Lucas was preparing for another day at the hospital, he received a text message from his college friend, Marta. She invited him to meet at the coffee shop near the hospital, where they often met to vent about the hardships of their jobs and share their accomplishments. Lucas hesitated for a moment, but when he thought about the support he needed, he decided it was exactly what he needed. When he arrived at the cafe, Lucas found Marta sitting at a table, drinking her coffee. Her smile lit up the room, and he instantly felt lighter. They hugged warmly, and Lucas sat down across from her, beginning to describe the events of the past few days. "You won't believe what happened at the hospital," he began, feeling relieved to have someone to share his frustrations with. "I was rejected by 2 patients because of my skin color. It's like all my hard work and dedication didn't matter." Marta listened intently, her expression of concern evidencing the empathy she felt for him. "This is so unacceptable, Lucas. I can't believe this is still happening in the 21st century. You are an incredible doctor, and you deserve to be respected," she said, the passion in her voice clear. "Thank you, but the truth is that these incidents have shaken my confidence. Sometimes I feel like I'm not making any difference at all," Lucas confessed, his voice carrying the weight of disillusionment. Marta took a sip of coffee before answering. "You make a difference, Lucas. Don't let the ignorance of some people define who you are. All of us who know your work and your passion know how dedicated you are. Your patients need it," she encouraged him. The conversation continued, and Marta shared some of her own experiences with prejudice that she had faced as a doctor. She spoke about a patient who had refused to see her just because of her gender, and Lucas realized that, despite the difficulties, they were all in this together. The connection between them grew stronger, and Lucas felt a new surge of determination building within him. After a few hours of talking, they decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The sun was shining, and the light breeze made the walk even more pleasant. As they walked, Lucas noticed that the atmosphere around them seemed lighter and more relaxed. He shared with Marta some of his ambitions, such as his desire to run awareness campaigns about the importance of diversity in medicine. He wanted to do something that would truly impact the community and show that everyone deserved quality medical care, regardless of skin color or any other characteristic. "That's a wonderful idea, Lucas. You should go ahead with this. Your voice can inspire others," Marta exclaimed excitedly. "Also, You can organize meetings with other doctors to discuss these issues. I imagine many of them have similar experiences. Lucas felt a surge of excitement at this. Do you really think it would be feasible? I could seek partnerships with the hospital and other organizations to host these meetings. Absolutely. You already have the necessary credibility, and many people would benefit from an initiative like this. Don't give up on your dreams. You can make a difference, Marta encouraged, making Lucas feel more confident in his ideas. As they talked, Lucas realized that his friendship with Marta was a true pillar of support. She helped him remember that he was not alone in his struggle and that many healthcare professionals were facing similar challenges. This realization filled him with hope and determination to continue his journey. Over the next few days, Lucas worked on a plan to organize a series of workshops at the hospital where doctors could share their experiences and discuss the importance of empathy and respect in medical practice. He knew this could help not only himself, but many others who faced similar prejudices and barriers. During this period of reflection and planning, Lucas began receiving messages of support from coworkers who were aware of his struggles. They rallied around him, expressing solidarity and encouragement. This support network made Lucas feel empowered, as if he were surrounded by an army of allies willing to face the challenges alongside him. One night, while reviewing his notes, Lucas received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Mendez, the most experienced doctor at the hospital. He had heard about the incidents Lucas had faced and wanted to know how he was dealing with them. "Lucas, I heard what happened. I wanted you to know that I'm here for you. If you need someone to talk to or just to vent, I'm here for you," Dr. Mendez said, his voice full of empathy. Lucas was surprised by the gesture. "Thank you, Dr. Mendez. This really means a lot to me. I appreciate your concern." Dr. Mendez continued, "Medicine is a difficult journey, and prejudice is a battle many of us face. Don't let that discourage you. You are an excellent doctor and can still make a big difference." These words resonated deeply with Lucas, and he realized that the support he was receiving was not just comfort, but a real motivation to keep going. He felt invigorated, determined to continue fighting prejudice and promoting empathy in the medical environment. The week passed quickly, and when the day of the first workshop arrived, Lucas was nervous but excited. He had invited several doctors and nurses, and the room was full of colleagues ready to discuss experiences and seek solutions to the challenges they faced. When Lucas took the stage, his heart raced. He took a deep breath and began to share his own experiences, including the humiliations he had faced. He saw expressions of understanding and support on familiar faces. The words came more easily than he expected, and the empathy in the air seemed to create a strong connection between everyone present. "We are here to learn from each other and grow as professionals. We need to join our voices to fight prejudice and ensure that all patients receive the care they deserve, regardless of who they are," Lucas declared, the passion in his voice resonating in the room. The conversation flowed freely, with colleagues sharing their stories and challenges. Lucas realized he was not alone in this struggle and that the medical community was willing to come together to make a difference. He felt the positive energy in the room, a wave of solidarity that enveloped him, and confidence grew within him. By the end of the workshop, Lucas was exhausted, but he felt stronger than ever. He had planted a seed for change, and the support of his peers was a sign that the journey was just beginning. This experience not only encouraged him, but also brought new purpose to his career. That night, Lucas went home with a renewed sense of hope. He knew that the battles against prejudice were not easy, but he now had a support network by his side. With the support of friends and colleagues, he was determined to make a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who faced discrimination in healthcare. The workshop was a turning point in Lucas's life. The positive feedback he received from his colleagues made him realize that there was a genuine desire for change within the hospital. Open discussions about bias, discrimination, and empathy became a regular topic of daily conversation among healthcare professionals. The energy in the hospital began to shift, and Lucas felt like he was finally making the difference he had been longing for. In the days that followed, Lucas and Marta worked together to organize a series of additional events that would focus on topics of diversity and inclusion in medicine. They planned lectures, training sessions, and support groups to discuss personal and collective experiences. The idea was to create a safe space where everyone could express themselves freely and learn from each other. As preparations progressed, Lucas dedicated himself to learning more about diversity issues in healthcare. He read articles, attended webinars, and sought out information about how other professionals were addressing similar challenges in their institutions. His passion for this new mission motivated him to delve deeper into the topic, and he was excited to see how this shift in focus was helping not only himself, but his colleagues as well. One afternoon, while reviewing materials for an upcoming talk, Lucas received an unexpected email from the hospital's director. It was an invitation to a meeting with the leadership team to discuss the importance of fostering a culture of diversity and inclusion at the institution. Lucas's heart sank. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. At the meeting, Lucas presented the results of the workshops and the positive impact they were having on staff and patients. He shared stories of colleagues who, after the meetings, began to feel more comfortable discussing their own experiences with bias. The atmosphere was supportive, and Lucas felt empowered to see that his co-workers also cared deeply about the issue. We need to take this further, create a diversity policy that not only recognizes differences but also fosters a safe and welcoming environment for all of our patients and staff, Lucas argued passionately. He saw the leadership team listening intently, their expressions reflecting a mix of surprise and admiration. After the presentation, the hospital director praised Lucas for his initiative and commitment. "We are proud to have a professional like you on our team, Lucas. You are bringing a fresh perspective that can truly transform our culture. Let's work together to implement these ideas," he said. The words of support and the possibility of real change left Lucas overjoyed. From that day on, the energy in the hospital seemed to vibrate with new hope. They were on the right track, and Lucas felt more motivated than ever to continue his fight against prejudice. As the weeks went on, the medical community began to rally around the cause. Other doctors and nurses joined the workshops, bringing their own stories and experiences. The meetings became a safe space to share and learn, and Lucas saw a significant increase in empathy and understanding among his colleagues. The change wasn't instantaneous, but every step he took was a victory. Lucas began to realize that his efforts were helping to shape a new culture at the hospital, where everyone's voices were heard and respected. He also noticed that patients were responding positively. More people felt comfortable seeking help and expressing their concerns, knowing that they were being cared for by professionals who truly cared. One night, while reviewing plans for his next talk, Lucas decided it was time to share his personal story on a deeper level. He wanted people to understand not only the impact of prejudice, but also the importance of resilience. He wanted to inspire his peers to not give up, no matter what obstacles they faced. On the day of the event, Lucas took the stage with a mix of anticipation and excitement. He looked around the room full of familiar faces and friends. As he began to speak, his words flowed naturally, as if he were telling a story about an old friend. He shared the struggles he had faced, from the moments of rejection to the small victories that helped him rise again. "I have faced moments where the humiliation felt unbearable, but I realized that instead of letting it get me down, I could use these experiences as fuel for my fight," Lucas said emotionally. "We cannot allow prejudice to define us. We need to come together, learn from each other, and fight for a more just world, both for our colleagues and our patients." The words echoed throughout the room, and by the end of his presentation, Lucas felt the warmth of acceptance and support from those present. He saw tears in the eyes of some of his colleagues and encouraging smiles, and that connection made him feel stronger than ever. He was ready to face whatever challenge came his way. From that day forward, Lucas became an active advocate for diversity in medicine. He began working collaboratively with the leadership team to develop policies that promoted inclusion and equity, ensuring that all hospital employees had access to the training and resources needed to address issues of bias and discrimination. This transformation was not just personal, but institutional. The events continued to grow in participation and impact, and Lucas became a central figure in the diversity movement at the hospital. His personal journey of overcoming challenges inspired many others to stand up against prejudice, and the atmosphere at the hospital began to change for the better. He saw a new sense of community blossom, where everyone was willing to listen and learn from each other. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas began to realize that his fight wasn't just about him, but about everyone who faced prejudice in their lives. He felt more connected to his mission as a doctor than ever before and knew that despite the hardships, there was a path to change. Ultimately, Lucas realized that every small step he took toward inclusion and respect was part of something bigger. He was creating a legacy that transcended his own experience, positively impacting the lives of countless others, both colleagues and patients. This realization filled him with renewed purpose, and he committed to continuing the fight for a more just and equitable world in medicine. With the new energy of change flowing through the hospital, Lucas felt more confident than ever. Workshops were becoming regular events, and participation grew with each meeting. Doctors, nurses, and even administrators were coming together to discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion, and voices that had previously been silenced began to be raised. However, as the movement gained momentum, Lucas also realized that not everyone was happy with the changes. One morning, while having coffee with Marta, he heard murmurs of discontent among some of the team members. Hearing the comments, Lucas felt butterflies in his stomach. He knew that the prejudice wouldn't disappear overnight, but what worried him was that it could undermine the progress that had been made. "Have you noticed how some people are reacting to our initiatives?" Lucas asked nervously. Marta nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, I've heard some comments. Some people still can't see the value of diversity. They believe we're taking the focus away from medicine and putting social issues at the forefront. It's frustrating. I thought that, over time, people would start to realize how important this is," Lucas said, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "We need to keep doing our work and focus on those who are willing to listen. But it's important that we also be prepared to deal with criticism and resistance," Marta responded, her tone encouraging. Motivated by his conversation, Lucas decided he needed to address these concerns head-on. He organized a meeting with the medical team to discuss diversity and inclusion initiatives, inviting everyone to share their opinions and experiences. It was essential that everyone felt heard, and that communication was open and honest. The atmosphere at the meeting was tense. Some team members expressed support, while others raised questions about the effectiveness of the changes. Lucas listened intently, and each criticism he received felt like a blow, but he was determined not to be shaken. "I understand your concerns. What we're trying to do is create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. Diversity is not just a social issue. It's a quality of patient care issue," Lucas argued, his voice firm. One of the senior doctors, Dr. Gomez, raised his hand. "I agree that we need to discuss this, but what you're proposing seems more like pushing an agenda than real change. Medicine should be our main focus, and I don't want these discussions to get in the way of our work." Lucas's heart raced. He knew that Dr. Gomez had a lot of influence among his colleagues, and that this opinion could impact the acceptance of the initiatives. "We're not here to distract from medicine, but to improve it. Studies show that diverse teams provide better, more empathetic care. That's an advantage, not a distraction," Lucas explained, trying to remain calm. But resistance seemed to be intensifying. Some staff members continued to push back, arguing that the focus should be solely on treating patients, without considering social issues. Lucas realized he couldn't simply ignore these voices. He needed to find a way to unite the staff. After the meeting, Lucas felt discouraged but also determined to keep fighting. He thought back to his conversations with Marta and the support he had received throughout his journey. If there was one thing he had learned, it was that change would not happen overnight, and that obstacles were part of the process. In the weeks that followed, Lucas decided to step up his efforts. He began collecting stories from patients who had faced discrimination in healthcare, emphasizing how a lack of empathy and understanding had impacted their experiences. These stories would be shared in future workshops, showing the reality that many faced. One evening, while reviewing the collected stories, Lucas received a phone call from a patient, Mr. Alves. He was an elderly man whom Lucas had seen during one of his first weeks as a doctor. The man wanted to thank Lucas for his care and attention to his health. Mr. Alves shared how the experience of being treated with dignity had made all the difference in his recovery. "You've given me hope, doctor. It's good to know that there are still doctors who truly care about their patients," Mr. Alves said, and his words touched Lucas deeply. "This is the least I can do," Mr. Alves. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, Lucas replied, feeling emotion wash over him. This call was a powerful reminder that his fight was valid and necessary. The positive impact he had on Mr. Alves' life fueled Lucas' determination. He decided he needed to share these stories of overcoming challenges and resilience in his upcoming workshops. The idea was to show the team that empathy and inclusion were not just abstract concepts, but essential to the well-being of patients. When the day of the workshop arrived, Lucas felt nervous but excited. He prepared a presentation that included patient stories and highlighted the importance of empathy in medicine. When he walked into the room, he saw familiar faces, some still skeptical, but many ready to listen. Today, I want to share with you stories of patients who have faced significant challenges in their health journeys, not just physical but also emotional. Lucas began, his voice steady. He presented each story with sensitivity, highlighting the importance of human connection and patient care. By the end, the room was silent, and Lucas could see that some of his colleagues were deeply touched by the experiences he had shared. We need to remember that behind every patient there is a story, a life full of challenges. What we do here is not just medicine. It is about taking care of people, Lucas concluded. After the presentation, one of the doctors who had been critical in previous meetings stood up. Lucas, I didn't realize the depth of what patients experience. Thank you for sharing. We need to continue this conversation, he said, and the room filled with murmurs of agreement. Lucas felt a wave of relief and gratitude. It was a sign that the resistance was beginning to dissolve, and the seeds of change he had planted were beginning to sprout. The connection that had formed during the workshop was palpable, and Lucas felt stronger, knowing that he was not fighting this alone. From that day on, Lucas realized that every small step toward inclusion and empathy could have a lasting impact. While there were still challenges ahead, he was more confident in his ability to meet them. With renewed determination, Lucas decided that he would not let obstacles get in the way. He was committed to transforming the hospital environment and creating a place where everyone felt welcome and respected, regardless of their background. As Lucas prepared for the upcoming events, he reminded himself that the fight against prejudice was a collective journey. Each of them, in their own capacity, had a role to play in this change, and together they could make a difference. As the months passed, Lucas noticed a different atmosphere at the hospital. Resistance to his work had diminished, and most staff members were now willing to openly discuss diversity and inclusion. Workshops became anticipated events, and many staff members even began to bring new ideas and suggestions on how to further improve the hospital culture. One morning, as Lucas was reviewing plans for the upcoming session, he received an unexpected email from the hospital's board of directors. The subject line was "Special Invitation," and his heart skipped a beat when he opened the message. It was an invitation to the hospital's upcoming recognition event, where they would honor employees who had excelled in their fields. Lucas read the message with a mix of anxiety and excitement. He had no idea that his efforts were being watched, and the idea of being publicly recognized made him nervous. But at the same time, he felt like this could be a great opportunity to further elevate the conversation about diversity. On the day of the event, Lucas dressed carefully, choosing a shirt that reflected his style but also conveyed professionalism. When he arrived, he saw that the room was full of familiar faces and colleagues who were also being honored. The atmosphere was vibrant, and the enthusiasm was palpable. During the ceremony, hospital leaders began introducing the honorees, and Lucas felt nervous but hopeful. He knew he was competing with other exemplary employees, but most of all, he was eager to share his story and inspire others. When his name was called, Lucas stood up and walked to the stage. The warmth of the applause made his heart race. He looked out at the audience, where friends and colleagues smiled and waved at him, and a wave of gratitude flooded his chest. The hospital director began by talking about the impact Lucas has had on staff and patients. Lucas has not only brought to light the importance of diversity in our institution, but he has also worked tirelessly to create a space where everyone feels valued and heard. His passion and determination are an example to us all, the director said, as the auditorium erupted in applause. Upon hearing those words, Lucas felt a mix of emotions. It was a recognition he hadn't expected, but it meant a lot to him. With a shaky voice, he approached the microphone to share a few words. I am deeply grateful for this honor. However, what really matters is not me, but the change we are creating together. This is a collective fight, and each of you is part of it." The words came out with sincerity, and Lucas could tell the energy in the room was changing. People began to stand up and applaud not just for him, but for what they were all building together. After the ceremony, Lucas was surrounded by colleagues who wanted to congratulate him. The sense of support and camaraderie was palpable, and many reached out to share their own stories of how Lucas's work had impacted their lives. "You made me realize how disconnected I was from what really matters in medicine," said one nurse. "Now I feel like I can make a difference in my patients' lives in ways I never imagined before." Lucas smiled, feeling that the seeds he had planted were beginning to sprout in every corner of the hospital. At the same time, in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that he needed to keep fighting, that there was still much to be done. That night, as Lucas reflected on the event, he decided he needed to use this visibility to accelerate his initiatives. With the recognition in hand, he planned a series of new activities, including a campaign to raise awareness about racial bias in healthcare and a mentoring program for new healthcare professionals. He called a meeting with Marta and other colleagues who were involved in diversity initiatives. "Now that we have this recognition, it's time to use this as a springboard. We can do a big campaign and really put the hospital on the map in terms of diversity and inclusion," Lucas said, his excitement infectious. Everyone was excited about the idea, and together they began planning the campaign. They decided that the central theme would be empathy in action, an invitation for all employees to share their experiences and reflect on the impact they could have on patients' lives. The main event would be a health fair, where there would be booths about diversity, patient stories, and even interactive activities that would encourage employees to get involved and learn more about their colleagues' experiences. Lucas also decided to include a roundtable discussion with patients who shared their stories, giving a voice to those who were often silenced. As planning progressed, Lucas felt a new level of energy and enthusiasm among his colleagues. Ideas were flowing, and he realized that the resistance he had previously faced had turned into genuine support. It was an incredible development that made him believe that change was, in fact, possible. On the day of the event, the hospital was buzzing with decorated booths and staff mobilizing to serve patients and visitors. Lucas felt a mix of nervousness and joy when he saw how engaged the staff was. He knew that day would be a milestone in the hospital's journey toward inclusion. As the fair progressed, patient stories began to be shared. Lucas watched the connection that formed between staff and patients as they heard their stories. It was heartwarming to see empathy spreading and understanding growing. When it was time for the roundtable discussion, Lucas sat down with patients who were willing to share their experiences. Each brought a unique perspective, and Lucas was determined to make sure their voices were heard. He began to mediate, asking questions that encouraged reflection and discussion. The atmosphere was filled with emotion, and Lucas felt honored to be in this position. He realized that the fight against prejudice in healthcare was an ongoing journey, and that empathy and understanding were the keys to quality care. At the end of the event, as the applause rang out and people dispersed, Lucas felt a surge of gratitude and hope. The recognition he had received had been the catalyst for real change, and he was excited about what the future might hold. The day marked a milestone in the hospital's history, and Lucas knew there was still much to be done. He was determined to continue his mission, now stronger and more supported than ever. After the success of the health fair, Lucas felt that the hospital was finally on a positive path. The atmosphere of collaboration and support was palpable, and everyone seemed committed to the mission of promoting diversity and inclusion. However, one night, while scrolling through social media, Lucas came across an article that made him uneasy. It was a harsh critique of the hospital, questioning its diversity initiatives and accusing management of hypocrisy. The article, written by a former employee, spoke about personal experiences of discrimination and prejudice within the institution. The words were heavy, and Lucas felt butterflies in his stomach as he read them. He knew that although changes were underway, the wounds of the past were still present, and the fight against discrimination could not be ignored. With a heavy heart, Lucas decided he needed to confront this issue. He couldn't let the past cloud the progress they had made. The next day, he arranged a meeting with Marta and other leaders to discuss how they could approach the criticism constructively. We need to acknowledge that the experiences that have been shared are real and painful. We cannot simply ignore them, Lucas said, his tone serious. We must be transparent about our past and work together to ensure that these situations do not happen again. Marta agreed, her expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. Perhaps we could organize a series of open discussions where staff and patients can share their stories and experiences. This could help create a safe space for people to feel heard and valued. Marta's idea resonated with Lucas. He knew that creating a safe space for honest conversations was essential to moving forward. Together, they began planning a series of events dedicated to discussing experiences of prejudice, discrimination, and overcoming them. The first event was scheduled for later in the month, and Lucas felt excited but also nervous. He knew that some of the stories that would be shared might be painful and that vulnerability might be difficult for many. However, he also understood that this was a necessary step toward true healing. On the day of the event, the auditorium was packed with employees, and the atmosphere was one of anticipation. Lucas opened the session by explaining the purpose of the meeting. Today, we are here to listen and learn. This is a safe space where everyone is welcome to share their stories. We need to confront our past so that we can build a better future together. As the event progressed, voices began to emerge. Some people shared personal experiences of discrimination, while others spoke of how they had felt powerless in the face of unfair situations. The stories were heartbreaking, and Lucas could see that many were struggling with their own emotions. An older physician, Dr. Carvalho, raised his hand and began sharing his experience. When I first started here, I faced a lot of challenges because I was the only one in my position. I heard comments and jokes that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to deal with it at the time. Now, I see that silence only perpetuates the problem. We need to have the courage to speak up. Dr. Carvalho's words resonated throughout the room, and Lucas could tell that many were touched by his vulnerability. His courage to share difficult experiences was contagious, and gradually more employees began to open up. An emotional nurse spoke about an incident in which a patient refused to see her because of her race. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my career. I knew I was there to help, but the rejection made me doubt myself. This should never happen to anyone, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. Lucas was deeply touched. The space was becoming a true sanctuary where every voice was heard and respected. It was a powerful reminder that the fight against prejudice was a collective one and that empathy could open doors to healing. Throughout the event, Lucas realized that it wasn't just about confronting the past, but also about finding hope and resilience in stories of overcoming obstacles. Many people shared how they had found strength in their experiences and become advocates for change. As the event came to a close, Lucas was overcome with emotion. The stories shared not only brought the pain of the past to light, but also lit the path for the future. He knew that while there was still much to be done, these moments of vulnerability were creating a new foundation of trust and empathy in the hospital. After the event, while talking to Marta, Lucas expressed his feelings. This was much more powerful than I expected. People really opened their hearts. This is just the beginning of our journey, he said, smiling. Yes, and it's amazing to see how everyone is willing to get involved. These stories will help shape our future and create a culture of empathy, Marta replied excitedly. In the days that followed, Lucas and the team began planning new events, all focused on building a culture of empathy and understanding. The impact of the discussion had been profound, and the desire to continue the dialogue was growing. With each event, Lucas felt the hospital was transforming into a more inclusive space, where diversity was not only accepted but celebrated. However, he knew that the fight against prejudice was an ongoing journey, and that every step counted. During these weeks, Lucas also experienced personal growth. The conversations about prejudice and discrimination not only inspired him to fight for change, but also helped him reflect on his own experiences. He began to realize that while he had faced challenges, he had also been blessed with the support of peers and mentors who believed in him. One evening, as he walked home, Lucas stopped at a nearby park and sat on a bench. He looked up at the stars and thought about what he had achieved. The journey had not been easy, but each challenge and each victory had shaped who he was. He realized that his fight was not just for himself, but for everyone who felt invisible. With this in mind, Lucas decided he would continue to strive to ensure that no one in the hospital felt alone. He was determined to build a legacy of inclusion and empathy where everyone's voices were heard and respected. And so, Lucas was ready to face the next challenges that would come his way, knowing that, with support and courage, transformation was possible. Following the success of the open discussions, Lucas felt more determined than ever to continue promoting inclusion and diversity at the hospital. He was excited about the new initiatives and the growing support from his colleagues. However, he soon faced a new challenge that would test his resilience. One morning, while reviewing his emails, Lucas received a message from a group of patients expressing concerns about the quality of care they were receiving. The emails described negative experiences with providers who demonstrated bias not only based on race, but also on sexual orientation and gender identity. The stories were both heartbreaking and alarming. Lucas felt a heavy heart as he read those words. He knew that the changes they were implementing at the hospital had not yet reached every level of the institution. It was clear that, despite the progress, there was still much to be done to ensure that all patients felt respected and valued. Lucas immediately called a meeting with the hospital's leadership team. "We need to address these concerns and review our diversity and inclusion training. We cannot allow bias to continue to affect our patients," he said, his determination evident. The meeting was intense, with many participants agreeing that immediate action was needed. They decided to implement an ongoing training program that would not only address racial diversity, but also include issues related to sexuality, gender, and other forms of discrimination. The idea was to ensure that all hospital staff were equipped with the tools they needed to care for all patients in a respectful and sensitive manner. Over the next few weeks, Lucas worked tirelessly to implement this new program. He enlisted experts to lead the trainings and also invited patients to share their experiences. Including patient voices was a key part of the training, as Lucas believed that hearing directly from those who had faced discrimination would help build empathy among staff. The day of the first training arrived, and Lucas was nervous but hopeful. He stood at the front of the room, with a diverse team at his side, ready to share their stories. The atmosphere was tense, and Lucas knew that what was about to happen could be a game-changer for many. "Today, we are not here just to listen to a lecture, but to connect with the experiences of others and reflect on how our actions can impact people's lives," Lucas began, feeling the importance of his words. During the training, patient stories were heartbreaking. One gay man shared his experience of being dismissed by a doctor when he asked for help with a health condition. "I felt like it wasn't just the illness that was being ignored, but my identity. It made me feel small and irrelevant," he said, his voice shaking. His words resonated with everyone in the room, and Lucas could feel the empathy growing among the staff. He could tell that while some felt defensive or uncomfortable at first, the vulnerability of the stories being told was opening people's hearts. One nurse, who had initially been resistant to training, raised her hand and shared her own struggle with bias. "I used to think it was enough to be polite and do my job, but now I realize I need to be an active advocate for change." "We all do," she said, and many others nodded in agreement. By the end of the training, Lucas felt inspired. The voices that were shared not only brought the suffering to light, but also fostered a sense of responsibility among everyone present. He knew the hospital was making progress, but there was still more to do. Over the next few days, the energy at the hospital was different. Many staff members began to become more involved in diversity and inclusion initiatives, actively participating in discussions and proposing new ideas. However, while progress seemed promising, Lucas was still aware that resistance could resurface at any moment. One afternoon, while reviewing some proposals for upcoming events, Lucas received a message from a group of physicians who were concerned about the new diversity guidelines. They expressed that they felt the changes were going too far, and that instead of promoting inclusion, they were creating division. The message made Lucas uneasy. He knew there were doctors who were highly respected at the hospital, and that his resistance could influence others. He decided he needed to address the issue head-on and invited the doctors to an open conversation. The mood was tense on the day of the meeting. The doctors were visibly uncomfortable, and Lucas braced himself for a heated debate. "I appreciate everyone being here. I want to understand your concerns and discuss how we can work together toward a more inclusive environment," he began, trying to set a collaborative tone. One of the doctors, Dr. Soares, stood up and voiced his concerns. "I feel like the changes are forcing a narrative that is not true for all of us. We should not sacrifice quality of care for an ideal that may not reflect the reality of our hospital," he said, his voice firm. Lucas listened intently, knowing that Dr. Soares' frustration came from a place of fear and resistance to change. "I understand your concern, Dr. Soares, but I believe that inclusion and diversity are not just ideals. They are essential to ensuring that all patients receive quality care," Lucas responded, trying to convey that change was an opportunity, not a threat. The conversation continued, with many doctors voicing their opinions. Lucas realized that it was essential to create a space where everyone felt comfortable discussing their concerns, but it was also necessary to dismantle deep-rooted prejudices. To do this, he proposed a series of regular meetings where they could discuss changes and listen to each other. "What we need is dialogue. We can bring in experts to discuss how diversity positively impacts patient care. We need to work together, not against each other," he said, hoping that his collaborative approach could open doors. After a few days of discussions, something started to change. Although resistance still existed, some doctors began to see things differently. They were willing to explore more about the importance of diversity and how it could benefit staff and patients. One physician, Dr. Clara, took the floor and spoke about how she had benefited from a diverse environment in her training. "Dealing with people from different backgrounds and cultures has made me a better doctor. It's a continuous learning process, and we should embrace that," she said, and her words brought a sense of hope to the conversation. As time went on, Lucas realized that the resistance would not disappear completely, but that dialogue was creating a space for understanding. He was learning that to achieve real change, patience and persistence were necessary. Over the next few months, Lucas's team continued to implement the diversity program, working tirelessly to create an environment where everyone felt safe and valued. While there were challenges, the team's resilience and Lucas's determination were unwavering. One night, as Lucas reflected on his journey, he realized that the fight for inclusion was an emotional roller coaster. There were days of victory and days of frustration, but each helped him grow and become a stronger advocate. He knew that every conversation, every event, and every story shared was an important step in the right direction. And so, Lucas was prepared to face the new challenges that would come his way, knowing that true transformation was a journey that required courage, empathy, and, above all, the willingness to listen and learn from each other.